Hello and welcome to The Rundown. I'm Tony Jones. This is one special episode of The Rundown, let me tell you, because in 1993, one of the longest, one of the most extravagant, and as you're about to recall, one of the most infamous tours landed here in Australia. The Guns N' Roses Use Your Illusion Tour. Now, it spanned 194 shows across 27 countries, and from start to finish would take about 2.5 years. Joining us in the studio on the Rundown edition is famed rock jock Lee Simon, and also a man who managed Guns N' Roses for 17 years, including the tour we're about to be talking about, in Doug Goldstein. We'll hear from them very shortly. But Calder Park Raceway is the one that we're focusing on at the moment. It was the second of the two shows to be played in Australia. The first was at Sydney's Eastern Creek. Now, at Calder Park, by 8 in the morning of the day of the concert, there was something like 20,000 fans already inside Calder Park. Many of them had actually camped over. Later on, that crowd would swell to about 70,000. It was a scorcher. The official temperature was around about 38 degrees. Those who were there say it was well into the 40s. Then, of course, came the most ferocious of storms, the sort of storm that only Melbourne can turn on. It was driving winds, it was driving rain, and of course all these people were basically trapped. So let's go to the rundown of the 1st of February 1993, and not surprisingly, the main story that night was the Guns N' Roses concert at Calder Park.
Police and promoters have backed outdoor concerts in Victoria after what they say was the overwhelming success of last night's Guns N' Roses extravaganza. But many fans are far from happy with what was claimed to be Melbourne's biggest ever concert. More from Nick McCallum.
While Guns N' Roses thrilled 75,000 fans, it didn't go quite as smoothly as the promoters would have us believe. Earlier, with the heat stifling and stall holders charging $2 a cup for water, many fainted or were forced to drink from the sewerage system.
Because I couldn't get water anywhere else and I would have fainted.
Then came the rain, and just as the Gunners arrived, many of their soaked and angry fans left.
Everyone's saturated, everyone's freezing, everyone's got pneumonia, and no one wants to be here. Everyone's going home, there's no pass out, so it's a waste of time, waste of $50.
The promoters attempted to keep cameras away from ambulance stations, which treated 1,400 people. Police made just 10 arrests. Indeed, by the time the band left the stage, police were overjoyed at the crowd's behaviour.
They maintained good humour, cohesiveness as a crowd, and they were well behaved. It was terrific.
Everyone
But the major problem for police started when the concert finished. The crowd was on a high.
Gunners were bloody unreal.
But thousands were stuck in the car park, in traffic jams, or stranded by a lack of public transport for up to 5 hours. The government refused to extend the departure time of last trains.
People couldn't get back and there was no taxis and people had lost money and it was just really bad.
Today, a feeling of a job well done at Calder, but lessons learnt. There will be more water hoses and buses next time, and there will be a next time.
And they are talking about other major events like Madonna, and there are others.
Nick McCallum, National 9 News.
Well, I'm not entirely sure whether Madonna did actually make it out to Calder Park. I'm not entirely sure anyone did after that. Lee Simon, your recollections of that day, because you were not only there, you were actually on stage.
Well, I ended up on stage by sheer accident. Michael Chugg was the co-promoter of that tour, and Chuggy loved getting up on stage and doing a bit of emceeing and using a bit of shock and awe to control the crowds. He is, in fact, I think his autobiography is called "Hey You in the Black T-Shirt," which was one of his favourite lines leading in, and he lost his voice. I think he'd pretty much blown it out at Eastern Creek a few days beforehand when they played up there, and then he handed me the microphone during the show, and I politely was the MC, much to his chagrin. He wanted me to work the crowd a little bit harder than I did, but a very memorable day.
Well, yeah, memorable, and as we say, infamous. Now, Doug, whilst Lee was on stage, you were backstage looking after your boys, Guns N' Roses. Did you have any idea at that point as to the chaos that was unfolding outside?
Yeah, we did, because couple of the guys that we employed, they'd worked for the Rolling Stones, Bruce Springsteen, The Who. I hired the best of the best because of some of the antics that the band can get up to at times. And so I was always dialoguing with them, and I was always showing up early to the shows. I wanted to see Rose Tattoo. So, and some of the other bands that are playing. So I'm always at the venue early, and I communicate with them. Having a security background, which is how I started, it's important to me. Crowd safety is very important to me. So yeah, we pretty much knew. Sometimes I don't talk to the band about it, depending upon how bad it gets. Well, I certainly was aware.
Well, you say sometimes you don't talk to the band about it, but on this particular tour, firstly, the band wasn't exactly talking to each other about anything.
Well, I'm sure, as Doug will attest, at that particular point, it had pretty well gone south for the band. It was Axl v. the rest. And as I recall, and Doug, correct me if I'm wrong, I think they arrived on separate flights. They stayed in separate hotels. I recall the band all arriving in one or two helicopters. Axl came in a separate one.
John Elliott's,
John Elliott's beautiful blue helicopter. John, I think, was running Carlton and United Breweries at the time. Separate dressing rooms. I was standing on one side of the stage about to introduce them with Axl. The rest of the band was on the other side of the stage, and they barely made eye contact, but despite all of that, just the best show. Regardless of the conditions and all the infamy that goes with it, it was show business, and these guys knew it, and they just put on a killer performance.
Was it as Lee describes, Doug? I mean, the relationship...
There wasn't nearly... No, I kept them kind of separated. Probably the best thing I ever did for that band is not let Axl know how much the other band couldn't stand it because the positions that he put them in. He'd leave the stage and they'd have to stand up on stage and continue to play. So no, I mean, there wasn't as much. They just didn't know. Axl didn't know how much the guys really didn't want to hang out with him. But his deal is he prepares for about 4 hours prior to when they want to be at the show. So that's the travel time. But it became that later, and certainly by the end of it, of course, it was absolutely truly.
What was the catalyst of the band falling apart? Was there something to do with Michael Jackson?
In my opinion, absolutely so. Axl had done an interview where he told the world basically that he was sexually molested by his father, his birth father, and it went out to everywhere. And then I heard that Slash he came to my room and said, "Hey, I'm flying to Paris to do a pay-per-view with Michael Jackson." And I said, "Okay." I said, "You know that your lead singer has just told the world that about the molestation, and you're talking about somebody who's being accused of a child molester, of being a child molester." He said, "I don't care." And I said, "Okay, we all know that for Beat It, Eddie Van Halen got paid $1 million. At least give me some ammunition here. What's he paying you? Can I go and negotiate the deal?" He said, "No, it's already done." I said, "Okay, so give me some ammunition. What's he paying you?" "A big screen television." I said, "Okay, that's what you want me to go to your singer with and tell him you're getting." And he knows that Eddie Van Halen got $1 million. He said, "Yeah, that's fine." So that was, to me, that was pretty much the end of it. I mean, if Axl had any interest in keeping it moving, that certainly thwarted that at that point. So
what the concert itself, so we've painted the picture now, the band is fractured. There's this bizarre link to Michael Jackson. But the concert itself, I mean, that story that we saw there from Nick McCallum back in February '93, where the people are just up in arms and, there was no drink. Your recollections of that side of it?
Well, one, I don't recall a whole lot of people leaving, and if the guy with the curly wet hair who said, "That's it, I've wasted $50, I'm out of here," is watching that now, he'd be going, "What was I thinking? I should have hung around." Regardless of how appalling the environment was there for the punters. I mean, it was just a dreadful way to endure a show. Everyone forgot about those conditions when the bands were on stage, and that not only applied to the Gunners, who just took it through the roof, likewise for Skid Row, likewise for Rose Tattoo, and Pearls and Swine opened the day. So that kind of overcame and circumvented all the other grief, apart from people obviously being attended to and not being able to get home afterwards.
Well, which is all very well for you to say, because how did you get home?
Might have been a helicopter.
Yeah, that's right. And what were you seeing from up there?
Well, here's the thing. the Victorian government, in its wisdom, decided to turn off public transport that night, which was subsequently changed, which you might be talking about shortly. And what I was seeing, because we hung around for a while after the gig, was a stream of people actually walking along the Calder Freeway and the Tullamarine Freeway. And it was like a scene out of The Living Dead. It was like zombies walking along, taking them 4 or 5 hours to walk back to Melbourne from Calder Park. There was no plan B. So that was a bit of a disaster, and there were no more shows at Calder Park. And the rules and regulations for what you need to do to look after people who buy tickets changed as a result.
Okay, and long after the band had gone, that's when the reports, there was fallout that went on for weeks.
Yes.
And if we go to the rundown of a few months after the actual concert, you'll see just how significant that fallout was.
The Guns N' Roses concert at Calder Park in February became a gruelling ordeal for the 70,000 spectators. They queued for hours in scorching heat. There were inadequate toilet facilities. Their drinks and food were confiscated. Soft drink was $5 a bottle. Water, $2 a glass.
It's a rip-off.
Then the heavens opened and the car park became a quagmire. More than 1,700 people were treated for dehydration and other complications, and at the end they were stranded for hours with no public transport. In his report today, Ombudsman Norman Geschke was savage in his criticism. The City of Keilor failed to provide adequate toilet facilities, water supply and first aid stations. The Public Transport Corporation unreasonably failed to provide services to a significant public event. Police traffic control was inappropriate and they did not take action against offensive language during the performance. The Ombudsman urged a coordinated approach to future concerts and, citing in this case Guns N' Roses' reputation as the most dangerous rock band in the world, recommended similar events undergo a comprehensive risk assessment. He said the packed Rock Arena concert at the same venue 15 years ago had highlighted the same problems and no lessons had apparently been learned.
They'd failed to take into account what having a crowd of 70,000 people would mean on a day of above average temperatures.
Keilor Council denies many of the accusations, but concedes there wasn't enough water.
In respect to the drinking water, we'd agree in hindsight, but I think that was mainly brought about by the overzealous confiscation of food and water being taken in by patrons.
Tracy Grimshaw for Nightline.
Tracy Grimshaw there, going back some years ago.
Absolutely, good to see her there.
Can I just ask, Doug, first of all, offensive language? Who would have thought?
Oh, really? No.
That would be the least of the concerns. The offensive language. There are people passing out.
Yeah, you'd never expect that at a Guns N' Roses show.
No, exactly. Can I just read? As I said, Mr. Whippy actually was mentioned in this Ombudsman's report. Are you familiar with Mr. Whippy, Doug?
No, sir.
Okay. Essentially, it's a van that drives around selling soft serve ice creams and drinks. In the Ombudsman's report, it says here, all drinks, Coca-Cola, Fanta and Mount Franklin mineral water were dispensed in 500ml paper cups and was sold for $2 per cup, which in today's terms would probably be about $7. Organisers were aware that a Mr. Whippy van was positioned in Calder Park Drive and was selling cans of Coke for up to $5 each. It was just more bizarre by the page of this Ombudsman's report.
And it's interesting that the promoters don't get a mention in the report, or maybe they do.
I'm sure they do in there somewhere.
But poor old Keilor Park Council cops a whack for it.
Because now, I mean, see, look at the jobs that we've created. Now the promoters sell those soft drinks and water.
But as bad as this was, looking back on it now, and like the people saying, there's $50 down the drain and what have you, it wouldn't go down as one of your most controversial concerts. What happened in Bogota?
Yeah, you know what I used to call the band was the CNN band, because every night all I had to do was turn on CNN and there we were. We were in Bogota. It was actually, there was a coup attempt when we left for Caracas on a Thursday night. And I had collected the money, which I never do. I usually just collect 50%, but we were going to play Friday, Saturday in Bogota. So we got out of Caracas on the Thursday night after the concert. The gear didn't make it out. So the promoters, I get there, and the guys that run the show the guy who runs a television station, the guy who runs a radio station, and the guy who runs a newspaper. Right. So I realized my getting my story out's not going to happen. So they tell me, we're going to do the one show on a Saturday, and you're going to give us half the money back. And I said, no, I'm not. So long story, I'll shorten it up. They oversell the concert by 30,000, and 30,000 people couldn't get in. And so they ransacked the entire streets of Bogota, police with huge sticks on horseback beating fans who thought they had legitimate tickets. They ransacked, jewelry stores and whatever. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, knock on my door. I open it in my boxers. A guy hands me a letter. I read Spanish, coming from San Diego, and I speak Spanish. And he says, I read the note, and it says, you have a mandatory meeting with the mayor at 3 o'clock. And I said in Spanish, as soon as Mr. Goldston gets home, I'll let him know. I shut the door, and I had hired U.S. Embassy security guys. And I had to call the guy in. I said, John, what does it say? And he said, it says you have a meeting. I said, I know what it says. Do I have a meeting? He said, no. I said, I'm getting kidnapped, aren't I? He said, yes, you are. I said, so it's time to go. I said, absolutely. I woke up the guys, and that was it. We were off.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, wow. And I forgot the most important part. As I opened the door, I was hit in the chest with a machine gun.
Oh.
Yeah, that's sorry. It happens so often. Sometimes those things, you fail to remember the important little things like that.
Just another day in the office.
Just another day in the office.
That's right.
So, are you still mates with the group?
Not really. It's I left in 2004. My kids were out in Hawaii with my ex-wife, and I was missing them and wanted to be a father. So I kind of retired for a while, went out and they're kind of grown now. So 25 and 19, they don't really need their dad around that much. So, yeah. So I left in 04.
Doug, great to catch up with you. We really do appreciate it. And just
anytime.
Terrific to recall that concert of 93 and the inside story that you've provided us.
Thank you, sir. Anytime, guys.
Likewise, Doug, from me, that's my hand waving
Lee, thanks, bud.
off camera.
Give my best to all my friends down there.
Will do.
Good on you, Doug. So,
bye, bud.
He's quite a character.
He certainly is, and the stories he could tell, some of which he has,
yeah.
And I'm sure there are others which might be published posthumously many years down the track.
But I mean, for someone like you that's been around for so long now, if you don't mind me saying that, to actually have played a pivotal role as the concert master of ceremonies, just fantastic to be a part of history, because it was historic, that concert.
It was. You've been too kind about pivotal. I think I was nothing more than a support act in the equation, but just vivid memories. And I guess we kind of look at them through rose-coloured glasses down the track, as we tend to. It kind of helps if you fly home in a helicopter as well. I know. But it was just ultimately a great concert, one of the greats that people endured, and for the majority of people, the drama that surrounded the entire day was almost a sideshow to the main act, regardless of the fact that people were footsore and weary by the time they eventually got home 1 or 2 days later.
Exactly, and it lives on many years later.
It certainly does.
Lee, great to see you. Thanks for being part of this edition of The Rundown.
Thanks, Tony.
The day that we recalled the 1993 concert of Guns N' Roses at Calder Park. An infamous tour, and that was just one of the chapters. We'll see you next time.